Life Camp USA is a nonprofit organization that mentors young men who have lost a father due to military or law enforcement service. Life Camp USA provides an all-expenses-paid, week-long, world-class camp experience that inspires, equips, and navigates these fatherless young men through some of life's toughest moments. Life Camp USA's mentors serve grieving families by helping these sons establish healthy identities, values, character, and goals without the crucial aid of a father in their life. To learn more about Life Camp's mission, visit lifecampusa.org. Again, that's lifecampusa.org.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, where leaders are empowered to equip and disciple men.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. My name is Steve Sonderman, and I have the privilege of hosting our show today. And as you know, the purpose of this podcast is to encourage and equip leaders around the world to more effectively minister to the men in their church and in their community. And today, we have just a really special guest with us, Ron Sweet. Ron is the newest addition to our team. Matter of fact, he just started yesterday, and we have brought Ron on to work in the area of church engagement, and he'll be telling you more about that just in a few minutes. But the real goal of today is we wanted you to have a chance to get to know Ron, to know his background, his family, sort of how he has got to this point of working with No Regrets on a full-time basis. So Ron, hey, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
So listen, why don't you start, with the listeners and just tell them a little bit about your background. Tell us about, your family and what you've been doing these last number of years.
Yeah. Well, how much time we got? Well,
yeah, we got time.
But I'm from Illinois originally. Grew up in a small town called Marseilles, kind of north central Illinois, I guess. Outside of about an hour and 40 minutes outside of Chicago. But I'll get into a little bit of my story here in a minute. But let me tell you the important details. Been married to my wife, Michelle, for almost 25 years now, and we have 3 children. Brady, Bryn, and Brock, all B's. They're 21, 19, and 17. And so they're a lot of fun, and they're a real blessing and support system for me. So really just love my family and love being a dad to my kids. So, but I grew up in Marseilles, but moved to Elgin, Illinois when I was a freshman in college to go to a college called Judson. It was really there that my life changed, and there was kind of started this pattern for me of God putting the right people in my life at the right moments. And even though I grew up in a Christian home and came to faith, around the age of 8 or 9, and was baptized in a small Baptist church. My dad led me to the Lord. I, like a lot of teenagers, went through a real rebellious time, though, through high school, drifted from my faith. And I always said, I think that my faith was in my head, but it was never really in my heart. And I knew a lot of the Bible stories because my dad used to read them to me as a kid. But I ended up at Judson to play basketball was really my goal. I thought I was going to be the next Larry Bird at the time, and I fell far short of that. But God had other plans for me to be there. It wasn't to play basketball at all. It was really to call me into ministry. And my dad used to tell me I would be a pastor one day. I told him he was crazy. I said, pastors are weird. So anyway, my sophomore year was a real life-changing moment, though, for me. I got to know these guys who were athletes, and they were cool, and they loved Jesus. And I started to notice they were different. They were different than the kids that I grew up with. They were the way they carried themselves around campus. They were the kind of guys that walked the walk, They just didn't talk about their faith. They lived it. And that was so compelling for me. And there was a Bible professor named Bob Laurent who was just a huge influence on me. And I loved taking his classes because he made the Bible fun to learn about, and he made it come alive. And he gave me a tape my sophomore year. He actually showed a VHS tape in class of an old video of Keith Green, who was a 70s kind of hippie Jesus rocker kind of guy. And it was his last concert before he died in a plane crash. Wow. And in the video, it was so powerful for me because he talked about what it looks like to follow Jesus. And he said, going to church doesn't make you a Christian. This is a really goofy illustration, but I remember it deeply. He said, going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going through McDonald's makes you a hamburger. And it really hit me hard in that
Mhm.
moment. I watched that my sophomore year over Thanksgiving break, and I dropped to my knees on my parents' living room floor. They were in bed, and I just said to the Lord, I said, Jesus, I need you in my life.
Wow.
And that my life did a 180 after that. I mean, I realized that I think that was the moment for me where my faith really solidified. It really moved from my head to my heart
Yeah.
in that moment. And my life was never the same.
Wow.
And here I am. I'm at this Christian college, and my senior year, I knew God was calling me into ministry. That I went on a trip back when I was a sophomore that year on a Fellowship of Christian Athletes retreat where I led a small group of middle school boys.
Yeah.
And that's where God really called me into ministry. So I get to my senior year and I'm thinking, God, I don't know what to do though. I feel this calling, but yet I'm scared to death to go into ministry because I feel like college truly hasn't prepared me.
Yeah.
And again, God brings the right person in my life. My senior year, a guy named Bobo Shears from Willow Creek Community Church comes and speaks at a chapel my senior year. And I was just drawn to this guy. And I went up to him afterwards and said, hey, God's called me into ministry. And he said, well, you need to come with me. You need to come be a part of what we're doing. And I'll teach you and train you and give you the confidence you need to go out and be a youth pastor. So
wow.
I ended up working with him for 4 years and interning. And I always tell people I made like no money during that time. But it was some of the best 4 years of my life. I was living upstairs of a house with two other guys from college. And, we shared like one bedroom and, could barely afford enough money to order pizza. But yet, it was one of the best times of our lives. And it was there, that God really started to begin to show me when I was at Willow Creek that I had leadership gifts, and they started to bubble to the surface, and my heart started to beat fast for people who were far from God. And so that was really a huge, turning point for me. And that started me on a journey then of full-time ministry. Ended up meeting a guy at a Willow conference who we became friends, and he said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we ever worked together? And he ended up being in South Florida. So I left my family in 1996 and moved to South Florida. Best decision I ever made. I met my wife, Michelle, down there. And so I did youth ministry for a long time. Did it in Florida and then Virginia, and then ended up, like anybody, you've been in ministry for a while, you go through some unhealthy churches, you go through some rough patches in ministry, and went through a few of those, but ended up at a church in St. Louis in 2002 to do youth ministry, and did college ministry. And it was during that time that I was introduced to the Crossing, where I've spent the last 12 and a half years as the campus pastor. And that's been a great run, a great church. But now God's calling me to something new and amen. And I'm excited about that.
Well, we're excited too. I mean, we really are excited to have you on the team. And boy, as I look back and I didn't even know all that story, but how God's been preparing you every step of the way through different people, situations, circumstances. And as I tell guys all the time, our future's anchored in our past, and that God uses, whether it's the hard things or the good things, to prepare us. And that's what he's been doing. And so we're excited to have you with us and to move into the future. Hey, why don't you tell the listeners, how did you first get started in working with men's ministry? What did that look like, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I wasn't looking, and you and I have talked a lot about your story. I mean, I wasn't looking to work with men necessarily, and neither were you. But I've been in youth ministry, then I was in young adult ministry, and then I became a campus pastor, and I really felt a strong calling to be a campus pastor. I went on a life coaching trip back, before I came on staff at the Crossing, and it was really clear at that moment, I was supposed to be a campus pastor. I really felt wired to be kind of that second chair, leading from the second chair kind of leader. And but in 2019, your buddy, John Fraunhofer, and I were together in Guatemala on a trip with Living Water International, and we were digging a freshwater well together, and just had a lot of time to have, conversations. And I'd known John for years, but spent a lot of time together, rooming together. that whole week in Guatemala was really a game changer for me. And we started talking about men's ministry, found out that he kind of had a passion for it as well. And we just started talking about, hey, what would it look like to maybe restart kind of the men's ministry at our church? And, you know, it had a lot of starts and stops along the way. And so we talked about that. And John says, hey, listen, I think here's what we need to do. Well, you need to come with me, and I'll take you to this conference called No Regrets at my old church in Wisconsin. And so that's what we ended up doing. John, you know, he took care of all the details. We rented a minivan, and John and I and 3 other guys from our church drove up here in 2020, right before the pandemic.
Right.
And that's where you and I met for the first time.
Yeah.
And
I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I remember the room we were in. I remember when you and John and the guys walked into the room, and, you know, all the introductions took place. And it was like,
And what I remember about that is you and I walking out together after we did the kind of you did kind of a little Friday night thing with a handful of church leaders.
Right.
It was a small group of us, and you kind of pulled back the curtain and gave us a behind the scenes, look at everything. And you talked about in that moment speaking to the soul of a man. I'll never forget that, because that really spoke to me as a man. And that's where it all started for us. We spending 2 days up here and going to the conference and seeing 3,000 men worship there's just something so powerful, right, about that.
Yeah.
And we were pretty undone, and we looked at all each other, the 5 of us, and we said, gosh, we need to take this back to our church. We need to do something like this at our church. And that's where it all began. And we got excited, and we talked about it the whole 6-hour trip home, and start putting the wheels in motion to do No Regrets at our church. And of course, that little thing called COVID happened, and then we put the brakes on everything. And that first year, 2021, then it was still, if you remember, there was still stuff going on with COVID. The church wasn't allow us to gather in large groups. So we took it, to small groups and said, hey, if you feel comfortable and feel safe, in your bubble with people, what would it look like for you to watch the conference in your basement or in your home and invite some of your buddies over? So there was a big group of guys that did that, like 175 of them that first year. And I had my group at my house, and it was awesome. And then we've hosted it live, the last 2 years, and 400 guys each year have come, and it's been phenomenal.
Amazing. Just amazing. Well, and I think you were a part of one of our leadership cohorts, if I remember right, too. I think you and John and sort of went through that 6-month process of, with other leaders and learning or discussing, sharing, planning. And that was a great chance to get to know you more, at least from my perspective as well. And just to see your heart for ministry.
Yeah. And I mean, really, I always tell people, I've been doing men's now for 3 years at our church, and it's kind of been more of a, I've been kind of a full-time campus pastor. Men's ministry is kind of just something I've done on the side, but my passion has just continued to grow for it. And I see, the need for it, and how, when you capture the heart of a man, when he falls in love with Christ and his life is transformed, it can affect his whole entire family. Yeah. It can affect the church and, his workplace, his neighborhood. And I just haven't been able to shake that. I caught the men's ministry bug. I always tell people, and I haven't been able to let it go. Yeah. And so for the last 3 years, I've really wrestled with kind of, calling and love our church. But I felt like God was calling me to more and to really invest my life full time into men's ministry. So, you and I started talking over the summer, and, one thing led to another, and here I am, and I couldn't be more excited to join this team. And it's so cool to be a part of an organization, where everybody is on the same page and believes in men's ministry. And like, we're going to continue to push that ball up the hill, even though only like 5% of churches actually have a men's ministry. Yeah.
Hey, church leaders, do you desire to teach your men how to impact their world for Christ in their own place and space? Then consider bringing Disciple Maker 101 Live directly to your church. Disciple Maker 101 Live covers the same material as our flagship 10-week online course, but in a condensed version. Steve Sonderman, founder of No Regrets, will come to your church and walk your men through this transformative course. while inspiring and equipping them to make disciples who make disciples. For more information, visit our website, noregretsmen.org, and book Disciple Maker 101 Live today.
Ron, why don't you tell us, as you look back on your years of now working with men and all that you've done at the Crossing, which is just amazing, just what's happened in 3 years when you look back and the number of leaders you've developed and how you've organized it all. But share with our listeners maybe just your philosophy of ministry to men and what you see as some of the most important lessons you've learned and sort of how you do ministry to men. What does that look like for you, and what do you think is most important in that?
Yeah. Well, I think ministry flows out of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a relational guy. And if I'm going to lean one way in ministry, it's going to be, I'm going to invest in people. I'm going to love and shepherd people. And that's really, the only way I know how is to, invest in somebody who will invest in somebody else. So that's what I've tried to do with our men. I've just tried to invest in our leadership team, and they've done a great job then of investing in other guys, and that's kind of how this thing has grown over the last several years of picking the right guys to kind of be on your leadership team. And then I spend the majority of my time with those 10 or 11 guys, and they're the ones who are kind of carrying out the ministry. So I love that team. They give me so much life. When we get together at my house and we have dinner together, we laugh, it gets loud, but we get things done though too. They have such a passion too for men, and they see the importance of helping guys, take steps in their faith. I think one of the things that, No Regrets has been a huge help to us. And several years ago, one of our speakers this year, No Regrets, Brian Tome from Cincinnati, we took a group of guys through his book, Move. And that was really great for us because just even that language of move, we've really incorporated that in our ministry. Like, hey, are you moving? Are you moving closer to Christ? Are you taking steps in your life? So we've really challenged each other, like, hey, you got to move. You got to start to have movement in your life. And that's kind of caught on with our guys. That word move has been really powerful for us.
Well, what I love about that is, going back to what you said originally, is what you're doing as far as just investing in lives, investing in a small group of guys. It doesn't make any difference what size of church you have. You might be out there a leader by yourself in a church of 50 or 100, maybe a church of a couple hundred or a church of 500. There's 2 or 3 guys you can invest in. And then they can do the same. And you just happen to be in a little bit bigger church, and so you've had to scale it, and it looks a little different, but the principle is the same. It's just life on life.
Yeah, and I think if a church has a men's ministry, they probably don't have much of a budget, right?
Right.
So the one thing that we can do with men, and I think one of the things that men are drawn to, is relationships with other men. I mean, there's something really compelling about we use I was going to mention this, it just hit me how powerful this is. We use this little illustration of a bus, and we handed out several years ago these little matchbox buses, and that came out of a conversation I had with a friend of mine who goes to our church, who is a former Major League Baseball player. And his dad told him once, he said, Jacob, as he was kind of going through the minor leagues, he said, it's so important that you have the right men on your bus, and that you're on the bus for other people. And really, we've used that in our ministry, that you got to have the right men on your bus, and you need to be on someone else's bus. And when you're on someone else's bus, that means you're encouraging them. That means you're cheering them on. That means you're praying for them. You're investing in them. And I'm just so fortunate. I have some really good guys, on my bus. And I've really tried to be on the bus for other men. And I think deep down inside, every man wants somebody on their bus.
For sure.
They do.
They do.
And so we've really tried to just build a relational ministry, around small groups where guys know at the end of the day, man, that guy, that dude, that group of guys, they're on my bus. And I can go through anything in life if I know that I have people on my bus that are cheering me on and praying for me and loving me and encouraging me and supporting me. every man needs that. I
Every
think
man
we're
does.
wired that way. I think
Yep.
God put that desire in us, right? To have those iron sharpening iron,
Yeah.
type of friendships that the Proverbs talks about.
Well, yeah, and obviously God models it himself with the Trinity,
Right. I was
right?
gonna say, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's the way of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he invested, in a
Yeah.
group of men who went out and invested in a group of men who then invested in a larger group of men. And
Yeah.
that's how this message spread.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, I'm glad you're on our bus,
And
and
I'm glad you're on mine.
yeah, and so I still remember when I was down at your place and you gave me a little bus that's over in my office, keeping that as a good reminder of, and I think it's a wonderful picture for guys to have that. Hey, why don't we just finish by take a little time and tell the guys, the listeners, what you're going to be doing now. And I know it's just your second day, and so we don't have it all figured out. No. But we know we have a general idea of where we're going and why. It's one of those things. I just knew, Ron, after meeting you, that I wanted you on the bus, and I wasn't sure what seat you were going to be in or exactly how it was going to play out. But it took a little longer than we wanted, but we finally got to this time, and because I just love your heart, I love your passion for ministry to men, and so. But we have you you're on the bus now. But tell the guys a little bit, just what we're thinking and what it might look like a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited because my official title is Director of Church Engagement. So what that means, right, is I'm going to be working a lot with churches, church leaders, and I've been in church work my whole entire adult life, and I'm excited to kind of step out of that role, but also to stay connected though to the church, and because I believe in the church, I believe it's God's plan to reach people. So I'm excited to work with pastors, and I've been in that role, and I think I can relate to them. For my entire adult life, I've been in the church world and been in ministry and been a pastor, and so I'm excited to be able to work now with men's ministry leaders and pastors, because I know the struggles, I know what they're going through. So I'm excited to come alongside them, to support them, to put my arm around them, to encourage them, to remind them how important this mission is, and to not give up, and to utilize, I think, the great tools and resources that No Regrets has as an organization, whether that's utilizing the conference or, Disciple Maker 101 or 201, or, going through base camp is something that we're going to incorporate in our men's ministry. And I'm excited that I get to stay connected to our church. Is 10 hours a week I'm going to be our men's pastor. So that was important to me, because as I'm talking to churches, I want to be able to say, hey, I know exactly what you're going through, because I'm going through it at my church,
Right.
So
you're a practitioner. And which is so important.
So I'm excited to work with churches, and whether that's, hey, how can we resource you? How can we help you in your leadership development plan? How can we help you in just your overall plan to reach men? I'm excited to be able to work with those churches. Yeah.
Well, and I know one of the other things you'll be doing as part of that, it's all related, is working with our ambassador team. Why don't you just tell the guys a little bit about the ambassador team, what they do, and the type of guy that we're looking for? Because my guess is there may be some guys listening that say, hey, I'm looking for something to do, and the ambassadors might be a role for them. But so why don't you just tell them a little bit about what they do and the type of guy we're looking for?
Yeah, our ambassadors are amazing. They're volunteers, and their job really is to connect with churches. Maybe it's churches that have streamed the conference before at their church, or maybe they're just brand new, to wanting to start a ministry to men. And one of the great first steps to kind of kick it off at your church is to stream the No Regrets conference. So we're really those 19 or so guys. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're calling churches and saying, hey, how can I help you? How can we answer your questions about the conference? They're really on the front lines of our conference and getting churches to utilize the conference to start a ministry to men. So they're really on the front lines of getting this whole thing started, and they're the ones calling, and sometimes not getting a call returned or an email returned, and it's just we would not have the amount of churches that we have already signed up to do the conference if it weren't for our ambassadors.
Yeah.
So
they truly are like the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they are out there, they're boots on the ground. Yeah.
And they're doing it because they love No Regrets and they
Mhm.
love ministry to men. And I'd say if you have a heart for men's ministry, you have a heart for other churches, you want to see our conference continue to grow and spread and see other churches thrive and succeed in starting a ministry to men, come be a part. Come be one of our ambassadors. We would love to see, I live in St. Louis, and I would love to see a few ambassadors really come out of St. Louis where we're starting to connect with other churches.
Yeah, it's exciting to see. It's the ambassador team is something I wanted to do years ago, but just really didn't have the time in my role to be able to develop it. And it's one of the first things we did when we started, we broke away and started No Regrets as an official nonprofit. And it's been so fun to see it grow and develop, and the impact they have, like you said, of getting churches in that we would just never have had before. So it's pretty cool. And so if you want more information, you can go to our website. And there is information there on how to become an ambassador or just what they do and things like that. So guys, if you're, looking for something and say, boy, I want to be a part of the team, go there. And then, one of us will follow up with you on that. So, well, listen, Ron, we've run out of time, but this has been incredible. It's gone like that. I knew it would, but it's so good just to hear your story and to hear how God's been working, preparing over all these years, and now getting us to the point where you're joining us. I think it's cool too. You can stay in St. Louis, be a part of the church. I just love that, with your family and your friends, and yet you can be talking with churches all over the country now as well. So,
well, thank you, Steve. Appreciate you, and I'm just so blown away how God is so faithful, and he's worked behind the scenes to make this happen. And I really believe strongly that God has called me to do this, and he has worked behind the scenes to make the dominoes kind of fall into place.
Right.
And
for sure.
I'm excited and
Good.
To be a part of this team and to continue to grow this ministry, and because it's so important, this ministry to men.
Well, listen, guys, for those who are listening today, the call to action is simply this: who's on your bus? Who are the guys in your life that you're meeting with on a regular basis to encourage, to pray for, to just walk through life together? Because life is hard, but together is better than alone. And so, God's working in your life just like he's been working in Ron's life. And we want to encourage you to look back and to see where God's been working in your life, and say, where does God want to take me? Where does he want to move you, as we talked about earlier? And then who are going to be the men that are on your bus, and whose bus are you on as well? So on behalf of Ron and myself, we want to thank you for listening and being part of this. Remember, if this has helped you and encouraged you in any way, go forward it on, share it with others, go onto our podcast page and to give us a rating. And then look forward to talking with you next week. So have a wonderful week, and see you then.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.noregretsmen.org/podcast.
MK Cellular, your local U.S. Cellular authorized agent, is a proud supporter of No Regrets Men's Ministry. Find our locations at mkcellular.com.